This is the CMS Philly 9 a.m. session in the community track. We're here with Francesca Marano, who's going to present on community events in WordPress. Francesca, it's all yours. Awesome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francesca. I think you're tuning in from different countries in the world to watch CMS Philly, which is great. Right now it's just me and you, Chris, but hopefully more people will attend. If not, all the talks are being recorded, so you can also rewatch it at a later time. Thank you, all the organizers, for working hard and making this a virtual event in kind of a short time. So really, thank you. In this session, we're going to talk about different kinds of community events that the WordPress community team oversees and supports around the world. We're going to start with the events from, let's call it the world as we knew it, and then move into online events and how the community is reacting. So my name is Francesca. I changed, sorry, by mistake, the order of the of the slides. My name is Francesca, WordPress community manager at SiteGround, independently owned web hosting company with over 16 years of experience, and giving back to the WordPress community in form of talks as part of my job description. So I get to do one of the things I love the most, to share knowledge. Sometimes from my own experience, sometimes from the collective knowledge of the awesome SiteGround team. In addition, my role in the WordPress community includes an active participation both in the community and the core team. I had the honor to co-lead the last 2 WordPress releases. And today I'm streaming from my bedroom, turn the studio, turn the yoga class, turn whatever room in Torino, Italy. So let's start with what kind of events bring the WordPress people together. We'll start with the meetups. The meetups are the heart of our community. Meetup groups are locally organized groups that used to get together face-to-face on a regular basis, usually once a month. Anything that brings together 2 or more people that share their own WordPress experience or they come to learn counts. So there's no minimum attendee for attending nor a required format. They could be round tables, they could be talks, they could be online talks, they could be social events in Torino. Unfortunately, lately I haven't been able to attend even before the pandemics because I'm traveling a lot for my job. But one of the things that we used to do twice a year are just social events where we hang out, because a lot of friendships also were born out of this. So there's no required format, no minimum attendees, just people talking about WordPress and sharing their experience and knowledge. Like most open source initiatives, I think WordPress meetups were born as a grassroots initiative. Like-minded people, lovers of WordPress, came together and started just chatting about it. But after the WordPress Foundation was established in 2010, a pro meetup account was created, so all the meetups could join in an official capacity. To be part of the official chapter, you go through a process. You apply to become a meetup organizer. You go through vetting because you're basically representing WordPress in your city. So it's important that you stand for the same values and the mission and the guidelines that the project as a whole follows. So then you go through an orientation where we go through the 5 good faith rules. They're basically a condensed version of the code of conduct of our larger events. We'll get to that. I don't think you can really read it on the screen, but they're like common sense rules to make the experience pleasant for everyone who's attending. They're not super restrictive, but they're really there to make it a good experience for everyone. Everyone is welcome, there is no barrier of entrance, and we want to make sure that that happens. So this morning, I took a screenshot of this map, like an hour before going online, because I really wanted to check the real-time situation. There are right now 843 meetups in the program in 111 countries around the world, which is basically the majority of the countries in the world, with almost 450,000 members. Of course, not everyone is active, but it's a pretty big number. And those are only the so-called chapter meetups, the ones that decided to join the official WordPress program. But there are tons of meetups that still meet, and they're not part of this program, but they still meet monthly, and they're fine. They're just perfect. You don't need to be part of the chapter to be a good WordPress meetup. So probably there are, I don't know if at least the same number, because that's a pretty good number, but there's going to be a lot. The WordPress ecosystem is made of millions of people with very different skills and very different level of knowledge of the platform. So when you reach this kind of diversity, it's, I think, easier to attract attendees and organizers alike, because there's literally a place for everyone. Some open source projects might be more focused, more niche, great, but more really talking to specific audience. The WordPress community and the WordPress project really strive for having a place for everyone. And this is why you see so many meetups. The next level is WordCamps. A community that have built strong meetups groups are a great place to hold WordCamps. That's what the WordPress community calls its conferences. Born as a bar camp, they evolved into more structured events. From a one-day, one-track local conference with maybe, I think the smallest WordCamp that I can remember seeing had like 48 attendees or 58, I don't remember. It's still a WordCamp, and it's very local, and that's probably what that local community can do. And then there are very big WordCamps also in Europe. In Europe, for example, there is Sofia in London, which are massive. In the US, there's WordCamp Miami, which is massive. WordCamp Mumbai is massive, WordCamp Tokyo. So there are, and there's still WordCamps. And also we have a flagships events, what we call flagships events, which are regional, big regions events. There are WordCamp US, WordCamp Europe, and WordCamp Asia. These events are held once a year, and they gather more than 2,000 people at each event across the 3 continents, or almost. We'll see why. And it all started quite abruptly, basically. Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of WordPress, posted in July 2006 that a month later there would be a WordPress conference called WordCamp. The idea is to bring WordPress users, that's from his original post, the idea is to bring WordPress users and developers so we can meet each other face to face, share stories, and try to figure out the future of our little corner of the online publishing revolution. The post also says, don't know if this will work or not, but it should be fun regardless, and obviously it worked. WordPress is not a little corner of the world of the internet. As you might know, it now powers over 35% of all the top 10 million websites or whatever in Alexa ranking, but it doesn't really matter. It's a massive CMS, and it's used by millions, and of course also the model of the WordCamps turned out pretty okay, I would say, Matt. And you can see from the numbers, in 2006 there was one event, this only event that Matt himself basically organized, and in 2019 there were 142 events. You can see from the slide that in 2011 there were a little bit of less of events. It's the year that the foundation was established, and guidelines were introduced to use the name WordCamp, because it's a trademark, and run the money through the foundation. So I think that as every moment of change, and we're seeing this now, and also with the numbers that I will show you, it takes a little bit of time to adjust. But as you can see from the growth, the idea of having a central body that takes care of, let's face it, also the most boring stuff of when you organize an event, you know, collecting the money, paying invoices, and building the tools that you might need to make this conference really paid off. 2020 is clearly an edge case. It's going to have different numbers, no matter how well all these online events are going to go and they're going to turn. It's not going to be the same. So in Q1 we had 13 events. 2 of them were online events, and right now there are 13 events scheduled. Some of them are online, some of them are still planned to happen in person later this year. We'll see how it goes. So having the prices are a very important thing in why WordCamps are so successful in terms of numbers, but also in terms of content. I'm thinking now that I gave this talk for the first time at Drupal Europe a couple of years ago. And at the end of Drupal Europe, they have a Q&A with Dries. And someone asked him, and Drupal Con and Drupal Europe and other tech events are pretty expensive. And someone asked, how do the WordPress community manages to do this? And, you know, they despite the fact that there is a lot of communication between projects, they weren't quite sure how we managed to have this very high quality of content and still keeping the price low. And this is also, we're going to touch on this as well, but this is certainly something that helped a lot because it removes the entrance barriers and it makes it accessible for as many people as possible from all walks of lives. For 20 bucks, 25 bucks, you get at least 1 track of talks, maybe a t-shirt, most likely a meal. You'll get to interact with some sponsor that might give you some swag, and you get to talk to like-minded people. So that's, you know, that's a lot for 20 bucks, I think. So I think I sometimes use this pitch of the shirt and the meal as it's kind of a selling point for people that are a bit worried about going to a WordCamp. They might be WordPress users, so they might be a bit afraid of going to a WordCamp because they think it's a developers event. So I pitch them the meal and the t-shirt, and that's how it goes, and it works. So I'm happy with it. You can find all the WordCamps, past and future, at wordcamp.org. So you can see also the story of all the WordCamps we did and announcements and everything. In addition to meetups and WordCamps, we have all sorts of events that are focused on contributing and giving back to WordPress. They can last the whole day with different teams come together to make WordPress, to shorter events focused on one aspect specifically of WordPress. So for example, you can have a contributor day, which is usually, but not necessarily attached to a WordCamp, or for example, in my hometown, we organized a couple of contributor events to teach people how to contribute to Core or how to contribute to Polyglots, the team that translates WordPress. A notable contributor event is the Global Translation Day. This is something that I think it's a great example, and I really wish more open source project would do this. I'm sure many do, but if your open source community doesn't do this, please keep in touch, and we'll be more than happy to help you organize one. So so far it has been organized 4 times. The last one was in 2019, I think in May. So for 24 hours, there are live stream sessions dedicated to different topics around WordPress localization and internationalization for users, developers. There's a lot of focus also on plugin developers so they can make their plugins translation ready. And there are also local events organized at the same time, so people come together to do a translation sprint. So in the picture, you can see, for example, I think that was the first year. There's an internet point in Kathmandu where you can see also a Buddhist monk walking by and probably contributing to the translation of WordPress. And on the bottom, it's a bookshop in Torino where the WordPress meetup Torino organized. So everyone is rallying together to make WordPress available in as many languages as possible. I haven't checked this morning, but it is translated in more than 160 languages. Of course, just I think about 40 of them are maintained up to date and have enough resources to be updated with the latest version. But you know, there's always room to make more, and the translation days are great for this. And finally, in the last few years, they were actually started in 2014, but they picked up kind of last year. We see more and more charity hackathons that we call Do Action as a function, as a WordPress function, started in Cape Town, and at the end of 2018, there were at least 10 all over the world, and I think last year there were more than 20. So this is also something great. Basically, a call is put out for charities to submit. Then different meets are teams are put together to work on those charities' websites. And at the end of the day, you have a pretty good MVP to go out the door. There are designers, developers, copywriters, marketers, whatever is needed to make the website. So that's a lot of events. Who is behind all of this work? Who organizes them on the ground, and what kind of structure supports them behind the scenes? So this is something that never ceases to amaze me. Despite the fact that I was part of many WordCamps, I'm always surprised by the amount of people that are willing to give their time to do this kind of events. So they're all organized by volunteers. No one gets paid to organize a WordCamp. So from a 5 people local meetup that meets at the pub and discusses WordPress to WordCamp Europe, that this year was supposed to go over 3,000 people, they're all organized by volunteers. Not only, also speakers are volunteers on the day of the event, and there is support for everything: registration, recording, everything. Big events might have paid vendors to do some of the hardest part, which is usually the AV and live stream and all this kind of thing, as you might know, dear friends at the CMS Philly organizing team. So for big events, there are vendors that do this, but normally it's volunteers. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of money going around. There's a lot of vendors to be paid. There are hundreds of thousands of tickets sold. So there's a lot of admin and financial and legal tasks behind this. So there is a subsidiary of the WordPress Foundation called the WordPress Community Support PBC, a public benefit corporation that takes care of all these things. So you can still organize the event and choose not to use this for the money to go through, but it's incredibly useful for people that don't want to deal with money. This really depends on your country financial system. But for example, in Italy, if I were to organize a WordCamp and get all the vendors to invoice me, and you know, on my end sell the tickets, it will become a very complicated tax system. So we have the WordPress Community Support PBC that takes care of all of this. And the community team. The community team is made of volunteers like all the other teams that contribute to making WordPress. And again, it's a bit of a different team than the others because it has the responsibility of handling a lot of money. I remember at some point there were over $2 million on the bank account, you know, incoming from the sponsors, outgoing to the vendors. So it's really a big responsibility. Luckily, Automatic, which is the company behind WordPress.com, has donated a significant amount of people to the community team who are taking care of this thing, which are kind of sensitive. So you don't really want to have, I, for example, wouldn't want to be responsible, despite my very deep involvement with the team. I wouldn't want to be responsible for this kind of financial situation. So we have different roles inside the team. Basically, everyone who has ever contributed to WordPress or has ever gone to a WordPress event or has ever spoken or volunteered is part of the community team. But there are so-called deputies, who are the active members of the community team, which take care of all these kind of things. And most events are free, except for WordCamps, where you saw the tickets are about 25 quid. So the majority of the money is coming in from the sponsors. And this is how the WordPress community manages to put amazing events with international speakers, and, you know, very qualified speakers that volunteer to do that. And we managed to do all of this thanks to the generosity of the sponsors. So because the venues need to maintain certain standards, we bring food and all the things that we said. So, and I can tell you that, you know, you as an attendee might pay 20 euros, but the cost of the event is obviously a lot more. The last time I was an organizer of my hometown, WordCamp Torino in Italy, we had 255 attendees. The ticket was still 20 euros for them, but the cost per attendees was over 60 euros. An event like WordCamp Europe, which brings together over 3,000 people from all over the world and still cost like 50 euros, because now we raised the price a little bit, costs well over $1 million. So that's how the sponsors come into play. And the other thing that is very important is that the WordPress project has built tools over the years to help, and has bought licenses for a large amount of users for other pieces of software that we need to organize all of these things. The first one is the WordCamp itself. It's a multi-site installation. We can spin off WordCamp's website basically with a click of a button, and they all have a set of tools built inside them, so the organizers don't need to think about this technical aspects. It goes from being able to clone a theme from another WordCamp. You can do the budget through it, you can issue invoices, you can do the speaker application, you can sell the tickets, and all these kind of things are done inside the website. So that's a very useful tool. We use meetup.com for meetups. We have a central account under the WordPress community support, and the meetups that decided to join get their own group. It's not mandatory to use this platform, because in some countries it's not popular at all, or in some countries like in Italy, it took a very long time for WordPress meetups to get their place in meetup.com, because at the time when we started doing heavily meetups in Italy, it was mainly used by a political party to organize their own thing. So not every country is able or is willing to use meetup.com, but it's really great because, first of all, the account is paid again by WordPress community support, but also you show up in this map. So you're part of a larger global community. So let's say once the travel ban is lifted, I'm traveling to Kathmandu, I can see when next they're going to have their meeting. So I think that's really great to pull in new people. And the community team members use Help Scout to manage all the requests we get from all over the world, from communities. So it's really easy because we have a ticketing system and we make sure not to lose things. And there are a number of automations, so it also makes easier the work of the community team deputies. And finally, we communicate via Slack. I have very mixed feelings about this. I do think that a few years ago, we saw Slack as the thing that will free us from emails, but nowadays I'm not so sure that it's really a relief because we now have emails and Slack, but it's a great tool to communicate async with the rest of the world. So having tools, it's absolutely great. So what's next? We are now, depending where you are in the world, you might entering month 3 of isolation. In Italy, we are. So what's going to happen with this incredibly rich and lively community? We're moving online. Okay. So how did it go? First, some events got canceled. And unfortunately, the first event that got canceled in 2020 was the first edition ever of WordCamp Asia, which was kind of an historical event because it brought people together from so many different Asian countries. I was supposed to moderate a panel with the people from communities from Sri Lanka, Japan, India, Pakistan, Philippines, and Thailand. So it was pretty exciting, and it happened less than 10 days before the event started. The event was planned for February 20, and I mean, you can do the math. It was when this COVID-19 started really to make the headlines. It was an incredibly hard decision because you can imagine they have been working on this for over 2 years. Imagine bringing people together from so many different countries with such a difference in time zone. Somehow they made it. They organized an amazing event, and 10 days before it was canceled. But ultimately, we know now it was a good decision. And yeah, hopefully they're going to be able to make it next year in January. They're planning already, and it was a very hard decision. It took many senior members of the community team involved, all the organizers, and Matt himself ultimately took the responsibility to do this in public, which I really appreciate because no one wanted people to be angry at the organizers, right? It was a heartbreaking decision, and I think little did we know at the time what it would be the first of many. Other followed. You know, it's like a chain reaction. I left some links at the end, and I will add some more. If you go now to the make.wordpress.org/community page, the first thing you'll see is a pinned blog post with tens of WordCamps that have been either canceled or postponed. And now we're in phase 3, which I think is the most important, and it's supporting events in moving online. Some events have just decided to cancel. Some events decided to postpone to 2021. Some events are betting on online versions. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke at WordCamp Santa Clarita, which was the second WordCamp that happened online. It was an incredibly good event. It's true that you cannot network face-to-face with people, and we at this point I also think we all kind of miss that human interaction, even the most introvert of us. But it was still great. We connected, we gave our talks, we chatted on Twitter, and we somehow find a way to do what humans do best, communicate. But it's very important that if your open source project, whatever the size, is thinking of moving online, it's very important to support each other. So I think the really important things to do are communicating promptly. Like, don't, in the case of WordCamp Asia, we had to wait for the last possible moment, because at the time it was so uncertain, all of it, that you don't want to cancel at the time it was supposed to be 1,500 people event because maybe a flu, whatever. Now we know this is the situation we're living in, so it's important to communicate as swiftly as possible so your attendees and speakers and whomever can make their plans over. Communicate in a transparent way. This is also very important. I mean, unless there are some information that do not need to be told, like if you have an insider at the Ministry of Health, I don't know, whatever. So you don't want to say that, but be as transparent as possible in what is going on. And if you're failing, it doesn't matter, because show your vulnerability. It's a very hard time also for event organizer right now, and it's absolutely okay not to be perfect, to struggle a little bit, and this is also a way to have your community join and maybe help. Why not? Support with the tools. If you can donate a Slack instance because you need it, or if you can donate a Zoom Pro account to make, or the GoToWebinar account, all of these things are incredibly appreciated. And obviously lend a hand however you can. If you care about your open source project, I think this is an incredible moment to step up and help others continue this incredible tradition that open source events have, to get people together, to nerd out and talk about what we care. Because at the end of the day, and again, I'm quoting Matt from his last State of the Word that was in St. Louis in 2019, the software is pretty good, but the people are amazing. After all, every open source project is made of people. So our software is only as good as our people, right? So this is really the time to come together as a community, I think. I left some links and documentation. You'll have the PDF, so don't worry to take notes now. And that would be it from me. So if you have any questions or you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on Twitter at Francesca Marano. You can find me on the WordPress Slack at Francina, which is kind of weird. It was my nickname as a kid. Or you can shoot me an email. I tended to reply. I'm a bit of a slow replier, but I do reply. Francesca.marano@cygram.com. Thank you for being with me this morning. Ciao.